Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's budget workshop board meeting of May 15, 2023. My name is Board Chair, it's Brian Dye. I'm the board chair for the Honolulu Board of Water Supply. Before I proceed, I'd like to state that this board is dedicated to providing safe, dependable, and affordable supply of water now and into the future. I'd like to go over some virtual meeting regulations required by law. Board members attending any board meeting remotely must be visible to the public to be considered present and meet quorum guidelines. Board members participating remotely must also disclose their location and anyone present at their location during roll call. The public is invited to attend our meeting here at the BWS Public Service Building located at 630 South Beretania Street, Honolulu, Hawaii 96843. You can also attend via interactive conference technology. I'd like to take a moment to take roll call of the board members who are present. When I say your name, please say aye and make the appropriate disclosures if it applies. Board member Max Swart. Here. Board member Nalehu Anthony. Here. Board member Jonathan Kaneshiro. Here. And I'd like to especially welcome who is attending our meeting as a board member for the very first time. Board member Warren Mamizuka. He is the acting director of the Department of Facilities and Maintenance of the City and County of Honolulu. I believe
Chair, he's not on
yet.
He's not on Zoom yet. Okay,
Oh, we'll
so
still,
we'll let you know when he logs into Zoom.
yeah, and we'll still welcome him. And
Yeah,
all right. If anyone is attending remotely today, just as a reminder, please mute your microphone unless you're intending to speak. If you're intending to speak, please identify yourself prior to speaking. If you encounter technical issues today during the meeting, please use the chat to send a direct message to our support team. Their names are listed in a message to all participants. To open the chat window, please click or tap the text bubble icon toolbar. In the room with us today are Deputy, of course, we have our manager, Ernest Lau. We have Deputy Manager Erwin Kawata. Here. We have Board Secretary Joy Cruz Atu.
Here.
Manager Secretary Kimberly Kuwaye.
Here.
And Information Specialist Tracy Burkle. Joining us by Zoom are Mr. Jeff Lau and Ms. Jessica Wong, both from the City and County Corporation Council Department, and also online monitoring any telephone testimony and otherwise is Information Specialist Wayne Ria. Testimony for today's meeting was being accepted, both written and oral. For oral testimony, that remains available. You can testify either by appearing in person or through, I believe we also have by telephone as well. To testify by phone, please go online to boardofwatersupply.com/testimony. Zoom registration instructions as well as participant guidelines will be sent to the contact information provided. Once confirmed as registered, Zoom testifiers will receive an email containing the links and instructions to join the Zoom session. To testify in person, here at our Public Service Building, 630 South Beretania Street, please pre-register by submitting your request. You can check in with building security, and then with for testimony, you'll be escorted into the lobby. Each testifier, if we have any, will have 2 minutes to state their position. A timekeeper will alert you when you have 1 minute and then 30 seconds left to wrap up your comments. When the 2 minutes are up, we respectfully request that you and to allow room for the next testifier. Meeting materials, otherwise known as the board packet under HRS section 92-7.5, are accessible on our website, www.boardofwatersupply.com/board meetings. The meeting will be viewable via live streaming as well on our website. That's www.boardofwatersupply.com/live. The video player will appear on the screen. You may have to click the arrow on the video to start it. You also may have to unmute the audio, as muted audio tends to be the default setting. All right, so for today, we just have one item on the agenda. That is a workshop, a meeting on the proposed fiscal year 2023-2024 operating and capital improvement program budget. Chair recognizes Ms. Raylin Nakabayashi, Executive Assistant in our Executive Support Office, and Ms. Jadine Urasaki, Acting Program Administrator, Capital Improvement Program Division. And they'll be presenting the fiscal year 2023-2024 operating and capital improvement program budget.
So thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. I am Raylin Nakabayashi, head of the Executive Support Office. So as Chair opened the meeting with, we are dedicated to our mission of Water for Life to provide safe, dependable, and affordable water from now and into the future. While we weather uncertain times due to our Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility contamination, national and international economic instability, and significant impacts of the war in Ukraine on economies around the world, our fiscal year 24.
Warren's on.
Okay,
Oh,
can you bring him up on the screen too? Chair Warren, Luca, the acting director for the Department of Facilities Maintenance, joined us via Zoom.
Okay, board recognizes board member Warren Mizuka. Warren, if you can hear us, we introduced you earlier. Welcome aboard. We look forward to working with you.
Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you for having me. My apologies for being late. I was over at budget hearings and just trying to get everything set up on my laptop to join the meeting, but thank you.
Warren, can you turn on your camera?
There you go. Yeah,
Okay, great, because I think we have to see you also.
okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
okay. So our fiscal year 24 budgets are lean and remain focused on our core mission. So our operating budget increases by less than 2% at about 1.9% over the prior year. The proposed budget is $241,683,964. Our capital improvement program budget, as will be presented, is proposed at $212,646,000, which is about a 15.5% increase over the prior year. So presented here are fiscal years 20 through 24 operating and CIP budgets. The operating budgets are represented in yellow, and the CIP are the darker navy blue. So as you can see, our operating budgets have consistently grown over the years due to increases in personnel costs, materials, supplies, and services, and the additional debt service costs from our bond issuances. The increase, though, in fiscal year 24 is primarily due to increases in personnel costs driven by collective bargaining agreements and fixed costs like electricity. Our CIP budgets have also steadily increased as we work to achieve our water master plan goals and contend with Red Hill. So this proposed operating budget is based on total operating fund resources of $292.9 million. Operating fund resources are essentially made up of our beginning fund balance plus our revenues anticipated for the year and any lapses or adjustments. So you can kind of see how it carries forward from year to year. We've been working diligently to maintain our safe and reliable service in the face of increased inflationary pressures and the Red Hill crisis. Unfortunately, inflation has outpaced our current rates, effectively reducing our carryover each year. Carryover is simply the unbudgeted, unreserved cash amount remaining at the end of each fiscal year. The fiscal year 24 budget as proposed further reduces the carryover going forward. Okay, so this is just a different kind of representation of the total resources versus total expenditures. So this slide illustrates our total operating fund resources versus the total expenditures from the operating fund. Resources is a column to the left made up by the light blue, which are revenues, the green, which is the fund balance that keeps carrying forward from year to year, and any lapses and adjustments represented in orange. The purple column to the right are the expenditures being proposed, or the actuals for fiscal years 21 and 22. This kind of illustrates here as you compare the bar graphs to just the blue versus the purple. You can see here the inflationary pressures are forcing us to spend into that carryover. The purple is exceeding the blue. So the revenues that we bring in are not keeping up with those expenditures that are needed to keep operating and keep investing. Okay, so as you know, the board adopted financial policies for the board to abide by. The first of which is a debt service coverage ratio of 1.6 times debt service coverage on our total debt. The other is net working capital. And it requires that the board maintain a floor or never less than 60 days while targeting maintaining 180 days of working capital. As of the close of fiscal year 22, we were at 4.31 times debt service coverage for the senior debt, 3.16 times all in, and we had 115 days of working capital at the end of last year. Okay, so these are our operating fund expenditures represented as stacked bar graphs from fiscal years 20 and 21. Oh, sorry, 21 and 22, those are your actuals. And then 23 and 24 are the budgeted. You'll notice that the operating funded CIP expenditures in fiscal year 20 were much higher than they are now. This is reflective of that less cash or carryover fund balance. And the size of our CIP continues to grow though, as we work to implement our water master plan of getting to 21 miles of pipeline annually. Further, the long range plan also contemplated the use of a mixture of both bonds and operating funds to achieve this. As we continue to grow our CIP, we will continue the mix of financing between bonds and operating funds. This is also reflected in the increase in the debt service, or on this slide, it's represented as part of our fixed charges, which are purple. So you'll see that growing over time as well. Okay, so this is just a pie chart to break down how we spend our operating budget. This removes the CIP funded or the cash funded CIP. So from here, our operating fund expenditures proposed for fiscal year 24 at $241.7 million. That's $83 million for materials, supplies, and services, or about 30% of our budget. $63.9 million for fixed charges, and that's about 23% of the operating budget. $53.9 million for personnel services, and that's about 19% of the operating budget. $38.2 million for debt service at 14% of the operating budget. And then $34.7 million being used in the capital improvement program budget. And then, the smallest category is at $2.6 million for equipment, just about 1% of the operating budget. So if we remove CIP and we just compare operating budgets from last year to this year, they're only increasing by less less than 2% by about 1.9% year over year, about $4.4 million over last year. Considering increases in our non-discretionary costs like our fixed charges and debt service and personnel, an increase of less than 2% is essentially a flat budget. And a flat budget in this type of inflationary environment where everything's costing more is actually a smaller budget. So now I'll get into the highlights of the operating budget. So there's no net increase in FTE or full-time equivalent employees. We are budgeting the same, or we're proposing keeping the cap at 741 full-time equivalent employees. And the $2.5 million increase that you'll see in personnel services is about 4.8%, and that is just reflective of the salary increases that were granted through negotiated collective bargaining. The BWS continues to hold our headcount flat at 741, and we're continually evaluating organizational and technological changes, to increase and optimize our operational capacity. We've also initiated many changes in recruitment and advertisement for our vacant positions by leveraging memberships that we have in professional organizations like AWWA and AMWA. And we've been working to market or develop a more robust advertising plan for these positions. And we're also working to expedite the hiring of licensed engineers. So the next slide is just to kind of illustrate our commitment to keeping that headcount flat. In the purple, you will see the increase in time of customers of the Board of Water Supply. So as you can see, that steadily increased, but the amount, the overall department headcount has remained relatively flat through all of that. And just to visually kind of show you the impact. So this is kind of what Campbell Industrial Park looked like in 1965. And if you compare that to the development we see today, this is just, it's supposed to just illustrate the amount that we've taken on and continue to, all the customers we continue to service. So for materials, supplies, and services, there's actually a decrease here by $3.7 million or 4.2%. And this is primarily decreases in funding for professional services and other contractual services. The equipment category increased by about half, or $2.5 million. And it's mostly to a decrease in the purchase of new fleet vehicles and a little bit, $375,000 decrease within our IT division. And it's just reflective of a project funded this year, so kind of cyclical funding. Our debt service continues to increase as we issue more bonds to cover our increased CIP expenditures. But while we have been increasing or issuing more debt, we were able to achieve a AAA rating from both Fitch and S&P with stable outlook from both raters earlier this year. This is the third year we received the AAA from S&P, and the first year we've got the AAA from Fitch. Overall, a AAA borrower pays about 20 basis points less than a AA borrower. So on $50 million, which is about the amount proposed in fiscal year 24 to fund our CIP, that's about $100,000 in annual interest savings. And finally, well, not finally, sorry. And for fixed charges category of the budget, this increases by about $4.4 million or 7.5%. This is primarily due to the increase in costs for electricity. And this is offset by a $1 million increase in our employee benefits. So I'm sorry to repeat. I know you guys saw this last board meeting, but for the public, we do operate a very large and complex water system. All of our shafts, groundwater, wells, source pumps, treatment facilities, and booster pumps do require electricity to operate. And again, I'm sorry, you saw this last month too. So our electricity consumption, while it has been going down, the amount we pay for electricity continues to go up. So that is reflected in our current year budgets. And moving on to the revenue side of things. So total revenues are projected to increase by about $4.5 million, just over 1.5% at 1.7%. Metered water revenues are projected to slightly increase by $5 million, which is only about 2% over the prior year. And that is based on a projected rate adjustment scheduled in the second half of this upcoming fiscal year. And other revenues are projected to decrease by about $900,000. And those are just reflective of our projections on interest income decreasing. So this is just a comparison, 22 actual revenues, our 23 budget, and our proposed fiscal year 24 budget. Okay, so this is a chart showing 21 budgeted versus actual, 22 budgeted versus actual, 23 budgeted, and 24 budgeted. So as you can see represented here in the stacked bar, the dark blue represents our metered sales of water, which is our largest, or how we generate most of our revenue. The metered sales of water, though, are greatly affected by use, which is also greatly affected by weather. And the forecasted revenues for fiscal year 24 are based on historical use patterns and the increase in rates tentatively scheduled for January 2024. Okay. So while operating fund revenues are projected to increase by 1.7%, inclusive of our CIP. Oh, I'm sorry. Operating fund expenses, inclusive of our CIP, are projected to decrease by 3.4%. So our fiscal year 24 operating budget is essentially flat. And as I mentioned earlier, in this kind of inflationary environment, a flat budget is actually a smaller budget. This was a slide we used at our stakeholder advisory group meeting that we had last month, I think. But it just shows the cumulative loss of purchase power over time with the kind of inflation we're facing right now. And I just wanted to close my part on the budget overview with just letting the board know and the public know that our fiscal year 24 budget is striking a careful balance between meeting our mission of providing safe, dependable, and affordable water while we contend with a lot of pressures, such as our increased costs for electricity, dealing with Red Hill, and overall inflation in the budgets. So that's the budget overview, and I will turn it over to Jadine unless you wanted to pause.
Maybe we can pause before we go into the CIP to see if there are any questions from the board members here.
Members? Questions so far?
Maybe just a general one, Ray,
Mm-hmm.
and thank you for the detail about just this careful balance that you're trying to hold. Can you talk a little bit more about if this budget is actually flat because of the inflationary pressure? Where are you having to tighten the belt from in order to hold the line?
The whole line, it was material, supplies, and services and equipment. So we cut where we could cut. So I heard you commenting to Ernie earlier that I cut some. So all of our divisions, I cut, we had to cut all of them where we could. So anything that was considered discretionary, nice to have, is going to be deferred to a point where our rates catch up with our operating costs. So this year's budget is very lean, just to keep those core services going.
So it's sort of a preview for the board, and I think we've talked about this before. The last set of rates began in, I think it was adopted in 2018, went for 5 years. So it projected out what our needs are, financial revenue needs, and what kind of rates we needed to produce the revenue we needed. So we're now at the very end of that 5-year period, and there's about a year gap between the next rate increases. So
Right.
we are going to be talking to the board, to you folks, about some proposals for rate increases for consideration for the next 5 years to meet our needs projected going forward. So it's always this careful balance between need for revenue to operate and to upgrade the water system, and also rate affordability for our customers. So how we manage the two together. That's why we bring back the balance, the seesaw.
Sure. Sorry, I'm just not
Yes,
controlling the
And,
generic.
and actually, I mean, and just to say it out loud, right, that slide with the seesaw with Red Hill on one end of it, you know, ours being something different than, you know, sitting right on the crisis of everything that the Navy's having to do, our costs for Red Hill are gonna be many years out, right? Because of the permitting process and really finding the new water sources and the like.
And hopefully it reimburses.
We just don't know what the cost will be. And then add on top of Red Hill, the per and polyfluoroalkyl substances.
Right.
And right now we have low-level detections in 7 different well locations. We continue to test so that we might detect more and more locations. So what might be necessary to respond to that? And EPA is on the cusp by the end of this year of adopting final regulations that would regulate 6 different PFAS chemicals in drinking water. And so we live in challenging times right now, very challenging times.
So does this take into account that we have to carry this debt for Red Hill for a period of time? I mean, because I'm assuming we're gonna be approaching the feds or the Navy to at least cover our costs, hopefully.
This does not, so, oh, sorry.
No, this doesn't account for getting any money back because we don't have any guarantees of getting any money. What we are pursuing, and it'll be shown later in the budgets, especially in the CIP side, is pursuing other full pots of money outside the Board of Water Supply ratepayers. For example, state funds,
Right.
federal funds were available. So if we can supplement on that side, even though we're not actually pursuing the Navy, although we are pursuing the Navy, we're not yet taking a legal action against them to force them to pay us. We are trying to get federal dollars to help offset some of the financial impact.
Okay, well, my point is that at least we're exploring
Yes,
for us to, I mean, so that we're not carrying the load.
When we do the next presentation of the CIP, I think it'll show that we are, in a way, more than exploring other opportunities.
I got a quick question on the debt service coverage. You have 1.6. Is that normal, or is that, because in the, I don't know, in this year, it says that was an increase of 10.7%. So,
The cost for debt service.
yeah, that's.
Yes, that is increasing, I guess, not significantly, but is keeping pace with how much more debt we are issuing.
Yeah,
At this point, though, our debt to, I guess, how much revenue we bring, that ratio, the debt service coverage ratio, is still pretty healthy at 3.16% or 4.3 on the senior. And Joe might be, if you want like a more information on debt service coverage ratio, but yes, that at that point, the 1.6 was set as like, we should always have at least 1.6 coverage on our debt service. We're above that.
What now, 4?
We're at 4.31 on the senior and then 3.16 times coverage.
So
all
still
in.
pretty healthy.
Yeah, okay. So
And the bond rating agencies, felt
Okay,
that we still deserve a.
just wanted to make sure the two numbers.
Yes, yeah, so it is
Thank you.
increasing.
Our plan with debt, especially what we float is revenue bonds primarily, but we also use state revolving funds, EPA, State of Hawaii, SRF program, revolving loan program, is that we borrow a little each year. So we're relying on cash to pay for our capital program, because cash only on our CIP puts the full burden of our capital program on existing ratepayers.
Right.
But by borrowing over a 30-year period, we spread the cost out to future customers to help bear some of the costs. So we plan to borrow every year, and we ladder that debt out over time. And in 30 years, they retire those bonds. We can float more bonds and continue to do that.
Yeah, no, I understand the concept. I just want to make sure we have the,
Yes,
we're-
we are keeping an eye on it. I think the long-range financial plan contemplated a mix of debt and cash at about a 50-50 ratio. Each year, like this year is not 50-50. I think it's like 35 million in cash, and I'm gonna issue debt of about 15 million. But we try to keep to that ratio
Over the long term.
over the long term.
All right, thank you.
Wait, real quick, what is the difference between the debt service coverage senior versus all-in?
That I would have to ask Joe to.
Yeah, Joe, are you, Joe, if you're listening,
Joe,
Yeah, sorry.
Finance Controller, please come to the boardroom.
it's not critical.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Just clarification.
for our reference.
Yes, sorry. So if Joe
I-
joins later, maybe we can come
Yeah, I
back to
think,
that.
we will answer the question in a little while, but the senior debt, I think, is things like our revenue bonds, our senior debt. And I think the SRF might be,
Subordinate, I forget what the word is.
Subordinate.
Subordinate,
See,
but yes, I
Yeah.
think the 1.6 target, though, you're comparing that number to our 3.16% all in. So we're still, or
sure.
3.6 times.
And so my next question was, do we have numbers for fiscal year 21? Do you know what these numbers were? I don't remember. I'm sure we had.
we do have the numbers,
Yes.
but we don't have it right now.
Okay. And then would it be an appropriate time to talk about fuel surcharge? You know, fuel surcharge, or should we wait till the end?
Anytime you want, Chair, you can actually bring back the slides on the power costs. But maybe Kathleen, can you check and see if Jones available? Thank you.
So my observation, given the challenges that we have, and not just Red Hill, but increasing electricity rates despite, I like that one graph where you showed our usage trending down, but the expenditure is still rising, almost double digits.
Mhm.
I'd like to explore, especially because I think this year, if I'm characterizing it right, this is gonna be the first year with no rate increase since
Last year.
2018.
but every year since we adopted our current rate
Yeah,
schedule.
the current rate schedule is over 5 years. The first year was no rate increases because we had a healthy balance of cash. We wanted to spend that down by moving more money into the CIP. But the first year, so 4 years of rate increases. The last increase, I think, was July
July of
1st of 2022.
And but this July 1st, 2023, we're not gonna increase rates, right?
No, yeah, that is
So-
correct. So 1 year of no rate increases.
So given that we're holding the rate steady, electricity costs, rising, inflation or everything else, and Red Hill, I'm wondering if we should discuss, whether a fuel surcharge would be appropriate. I know for sure ECO has passed on fuel surcharges. I mean, it's a kind of a matter of course for them. They pass on fuel surcharges to, to all of the customers. I think other agencies and, in other instances, there are, full fuel surcharges. So I was wondering, number one, are we able to have a fuel surcharge? And then number two, if we are able, what is the process?
Okay, we do have in the water rates a provision for adjustments for power costs. And it's done on the year after we incur the cost to recover it. So looks like Joe is not here in person, but
No,
he's online.
Actually,
ahead.
Ernie, no, I'm online.
Yeah, go ahead.
And so first,
So-
I want to address the first question, the difference between all-in and senior debt service coverage. Basically, the senior debt service coverage is the debt on our municipal bonds. And currently the all-in also includes our SRF debt coverage. So in the future, as we get other debt instruments, such as, the WIFIA loan, it will fall into one of those two categories. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does, Joe. Thank you very much.
And as far
that,
yes,
a follow-up to that. So in practical terms, what does it mean? I now know which bonds and which loans go into which bucket, but what does obviously, I'm assuming that we would be obligated to pay the senior debt first. Is that how it works?
yeah. Senior debt is just what it sounds like. It's paid first. Well, in the event of a default, in the event of the fact that we don't have enough money to pay our debt service, then we would pay senior debt first. And yeah, junior debt second. As Ray pointed out, our coverage ratios are in the 3 and 4 times. Really what that means is that when you take our revenues and then you subtract our operating costs and leaving out all the debt service costs, we have enough basically to pay our debt service coverage in that year like 3 or 4 times over. So that's why we consider it a healthy debt service coverage ratio. Our bond covenants actually are much lower than that. I believe our bond covenant is 1.2 times. And so our internal covenant is 1.6. So we feel that these give us very healthy margins to manage our debt. And keep us out of any, bad things such as, a default, which is something that no agency ever wants to go into. So currently, yes, we're well above all those issues.
Thank you.
Okay, so Joe, maybe you can explain the power cost adjustment clause, the calculation that we can do to implement that.
Okay, no, it is, and the power, as we go through the rate study, and I know we'll be talking to the board and the public more as we develop our rates for the coming year, but in those we develop, a budget or expected cost for everything basically, but one of the big wild cards obviously is power costs. So we expect, when we develop our rates, we have a number in there that accelerates each year for how much we expect to pay on power. If we look back and at the end of the year, we exceeded that amount by increments of $500,000 or $500,000, then we can increase the rates on consumption by a penny each. So that is to recover that extra amount. So that kind of balances. We don't have to build. We can be reasonable in our expectations for power costs, and should they spike up a lot more than we anticipate, then the following year we can recover those by increasing the rates that we charge our customers. But we don't lock in those rates ahead of time. It just gives us that flexibility.
It's based on a calculation then.
It's
Yeah,
yes, it's based on our actual consumption.
Gallons.
So in other words, it's like a recapture of costs we've already spent.
Yes, it's a recapture of costs we've already spent.
So I made a decision to not recapture the cost, but to look at how we can economize or belt tighten to make up that difference. And the primary reason is our customers have just gone through COVID. They're in recovery mode. Inflation, they're facing all the same inflationary pressures that we are. And we are also looking at the next set of 5-year rates that we have to adopt with our customers. So in that, we'll try to project and make assumptions based on a higher power cost to actually bring in more revenue to forego this situation. But the decision was mine. I felt our customers were bearing already a heavy load.
Are we able to take a look, just take another look, not decide anything, but take another look, like how much that would mean in dollars?
Joe, I think
To go back?
we can do it for, can we do it for every year that we haven't collected or just for the last year?
No, we can, yeah, we can provide that information. I don't have it at my fingertips, but yeah, we can go. I think there have been, a couple years where we've waived the power cost adjustment, and so we can go and calculate what that lost revenue would have been.
Yeah, I think we really appreciate that, just to know what it is, not that we're actually gonna collect.
Yeah,
But just to know what
give
it
you an
is.
idea of what the
Yeah.
additional cost per 1,000 gallons would be to
Yeah.
all of our customers, yeah.
We can do
Just
that.
for your information, Joe, we are looking at other outside sources, potentially for recovery of some of that cost.
Okay.
Mainly federal funds.
Okay, so maybe, definitely before or I don't know, at the same time as the rate study, or maybe next meeting, I don't know how much time you folks need to.
I think we can do it next month in June. Where we
Okay.
bring in some ideas on what the range of rate proposals might be for the board's consideration next month.
And at the same time, look at, basically what that calculation is
Yeah,
potentially for the, fuel surcharge.
Yeah,
Okay,
we can.
okay, members, any more questions before we move on to our CIP?
Well, when was that provision adopted? I guess, like, what was it, what's period?
So I've been here as manager for 11 years. And I think it's been in place even prior to that. I don't think we implemented it, at least in my time, in the last 11 years.
That surcharge?
Yeah,
Okay.
and then I don't know how long before that. When was the last time we implemented the power cost adjustment policy? So it's something that's there, but we haven't really used too often.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank
Thank you.
you.
Thanks, Ray. Good afternoon, Chair Andaya and board members. I'm J.D. Nurasaki, the acting program administrator for the Capital Projects Division. And I'll go over our fiscal year 2024 capital improvement program budget. The annual capital improvement program is our commitment to the future of our water system. The annual program is compiled by our office, the Capital Projects Division, and includes projects from all of our division and staff offices. The capital improvement program supports our department's vision and mission and is aligned with our water master plan, our department's strategic plan, our department goals and objectives in support of these plans, and our 6-year capital improvement program. The capital improvement program carefully balances the needs of the system in providing safe, reliable water service with cost-effective management of assets and our funding. The capital improvement program is comprised of 3 project categories: research and development, renewal and replacement, and capacity expansion. At this time, I'm going to turn it back over to Raylyn to go over the funding initiatives and explaining our overall financing for the fiscal year 24 capital improvement program budget.
Sorry, me again. Okay, so this is our overall capital improvement program budget at 212,646,000. And this table breaks out for you how we intend to fund all of that. So about 34.5 or about 30, just under 35 million operating fund, state revolving fund, which is one of those low interest loan programs that manager mentioned, just under 40 million. Our special expendable fund, which is our revenues from water systems facility charges. It's a restricted fund, And then we also have the improvement fund, which are our bond issuances. And then what I'm really here to kind of go over with you is the amount that we're budgeting in the extramural fund, which is essentially another restricted fund in which the revenues and expenditures from this fund are limited by agreement. So whether it's like federal grant agreement, state, or some other kind of limited purpose type monies. So in the extramural fund, the first projects that are budgeted in extramural are 10 million, you'll see $10 million of funding for research and development category. And that's for our exploratory wells and our monitoring wells for Red Hill contamination. A big thank you to the state who passed in House Bill number 300, or the state's budget, $10 million of state general obligation bond funding for the Board of Water Supply for a monitoring well, for an exploratory well and 7 monitoring wells. So that's the breakdown of extramural funding there.
Once you pause there, I just, again, I want to reiterate our appreciation from the state legislature, the House and the Senate, for supporting the use of allocation of general obligation bond funding for some of our CIP projects here related to exploratory well and monitoring wells related to Red Hill. General obligation bonds are not an obligation of the Board of Water Supply to repay. They are the state of Hawaii's obligation to repay. So basically, this is kind of a construction grant and aid to us, and we really appreciate the action by the state legislature and look forward to working with the governor on the release of these funds for these projects. So this is, Max, to your point, looking for money outside of our ratepayers, and that's kind of the mode of operation we're going to be in going forward. We have to do that. Thank you.
Okay, the next project you'll see that has funding in extramural is our project number 11, Kahilani Place and Aiea Heights Drive water system improvements. So this one is double budgeted. So we put in a request for congressionally directed spending appropriation with the federal government. They're still in their process of budgeting, so we're not sure how that will turn out. If it doesn't get funded, we've also put funding in the state revolving fund, I guess, column, and we'll take out a low interest loan to finance this project should the federal funds not come through. The next one is projects 3839 in the CIP. And this is same as a Kahilani project. We did put in a request for congressionally directed spending. Should those funds not come through, we've also budgeted improvement funds, or so we'd sell bonds to proceed with this project. This is just a little bit about why I had to budget it in both places. We're currently kind of in this highlighted period. The appropriations request process started end of last calendar year. We put in our earmark request or congressionally directed requests, and now we wait, and we'll see maybe in October or so if the federal government will actually fund our projects. Big thanks to Senator Schatz. This is just from his website. So we submitted to him, and he submitted these projects for the Board of Water Supply forward into committee for their consideration. Also, mahalo to Congressman Case, who submitted our Kahilani project for congressionally directed spending. And finally, project number 40 on the CIP is for our Kaliloa seawater desalination facility. And that 25 million is not duplicative of the 35. This is in addition to, we're putting in 35 million of our own funding. That's our Special X fund. And then we actually were awarded $25 million in state and local fiscal recovery funds from the City and County of Honolulu's funding that they got through the American Rescue Plan Act. So total project budget in fiscal year 24 is 60, with 25 of it coming from federal funds. And I will hand it back to Jay Dean.
Thanks, Raylan. As we all know, the municipal water system is massive and diverse, as Raylan showed you in the previous slides. This map illustrates the distribution of this year's design and construction projects around the island as we manage the island-wide municipal water system. These are the highlights for Category 1 of our research and development. As Raylan covered earlier, while the budget amount is 25 million, 10 million of that will be from the state funding for the exploratory and monitoring wells. We have, with that appropriation for the drilling, casing, and pumping and testing of the exploratory well at Newtown 550 as part of the Red Hill situation. We are also planning up to 10 monitoring wells to be used as centennial wells to warn us of the presence of an underground fuel plume from that Red Hill contamination. Additionally, we have our construction management for various construction projects that we will continue to provide as additional support for the branch. Category 2 addresses the needs of an aging infrastructure. And while the budget number is 60 million, 5 million of that will be potential federal funding for our Kahilinai and Aiea Heights Drive water system improvement project. This category includes projects to perform renovations and renewals to our aging facilities. This background and corner photo is of our Waihe'e Tunnel and Inclined Wells Chlorinator area, which is our first project that's on the slide. We also have our Makakilo Booster number 1 electrical upgrades and facility projects. Kauanohi Booster number 2, our MCC replacement and facility repairs, Kalihi High Service Booster electrical upgrades, and the Hawaii Loa Booster number 1 pump and MCC replacement. We also have additional renewal and replacement needs, which includes 1.54 miles of our water main are included in fiscal 24. Due to higher priorities currently on our Red Hill projects, our 21 miles replacement target has been placed on hold. We have Kahilinai Place and Aiea Heights Drive water system improvement project, which I mentioned earlier, our Kokela Drive and Mohala Way water system improvement project in Honolulu, and Halupa Street water system improvement in Halapa. We also have our corrosion repairs and controls for our granular activated carbon water treatment facilities at our Mililani Wells 1, compliance with the State Department of Land and Natural Resources dam program improvements for our Nuuanu Reservoir number 1 dam improvements, and our Nanakuli 242 altitude valve project. In fiscal year 24, we will continue to upkeep our reservoirs and other Board of Water Supply structures at our facilities around the island, while also continuing to upgrade all of our security at our BWS facilities. The photo on our right is our rehabilitation of our Makaha Shaft tunnel so that we could get this back online to support our water needs. We also have pump and renewal replacement projects to be done at Waipahu Wells 2, Waipahu Wells 4, Waianae Wells 2, and Ainokoa Wells. We have facility and repair and renovations at our Hawaii Loa Booster number 1, our Kalihi Pump Station fire alarm upgrade, and our Baratania HVAC upgrade projects. We have security improvement projects at our Kaimuki Pump Station, which is the photo you see here. One of our higher priorities due to issues related to the facility being open and inviting unnecessary residents that have been known to frequent the area, and also security improvement at our Nuuanu Nursery and Kala'au Wells. The largest category this year in our capital improvement program is Category 3, our capacity expansion. While the budget number is at 102 million, 30 million will be from the Department of Health's Clean Water State Revolving Fund, which is our East Kapolei 215 and Kualakai Parkway 16-inch recycled water main. 28 million in federal funding for the Kailailoa desalination and our Honolulu 42-inch. Categories, the projects in this category noted on this slide. So the Red Hill Contamination Response Production Well at Aiea 497, our Waialainui well environmental assessment, and as I mentioned earlier, our East Kapolei 215, as well as our Kuala Parkway. And these are our recycled water transmission main and reservoir, and that's what you can see on the right side of the slide. Additional projects include the construction of a new well source at our Makua wells, as shown on the top right corner, designed for our Honolulu District 42-inch mains, as shown on the bottom, which shows the entire alignment from along Beretania through King Street to Eisenberg, and our design, build, operate, maintain contract at our Kailailoa desalination, seawater desalination facility. This concludes the highlights for this year's capital improvement program, and I'm here to answer any questions now or after, because I will be turning this over to Barry Usagawa, our program administrator for water resources, to go over the Kailailoa seawater desalination facility project.
Any questions from the board members so far on the CMP?
Thanks so much. Just one question, you know, when you said that you're putting the CIP section of the 22 mile, trying to get to the 22 miles of pipe replacement, is that from like the standpoint of like dollars available or workforce internally to track all this because of all these other projects, because of Red Hill, or what did we have to trade to, or what did we give up to get whatever we had to lean into for Red Hill?
So a lot of it is based on what we can afford.
Okay, there's dollars.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So the focus is really focused now on source development.
Yeah.
The pipeline replacement is important, and we'll get back to that. But right now, we need to develop new sources to replace capacity that's currently shut down. Address the uncertainties of PFAS out there that are affecting different well sources. Source development is priority right now for us. We do have workforce challenges too. The number of vacancies, inability to find engineers to replace them. What is your current engineering vacancy rate?
About 14. We're 14 out of 62 employees within capital projects.
14 engineers.
14 engineers.
Out of how many engineers?
About 25. So pretty significant.
You're missing 14 engineers out of 25.
We have a total, I think, of 25 to 30 engineers in the capital projects division. Because the rest would be all of our inspectors that we have.
Engineer support tech.
And engineer support techs, yeah.
So you have a total of how many total in totality, including vacancies?
60, we have, for capital projects, we have about 62 positions.
The 14 engineers plus how many engineering support techs are vacant?
5.
You have 2.
2, yes.
5 vacant. But this is not an unusual situation. I think many organizations, public and private, are facing the same workforce challenges right now to fill the workforce. The other aspects, so it's been a challenge. There's no easy answer for this right now.
Any more questions?
Thank you, Chair.
I've got a couple. Okay, so I know we're going to hold off on the 21 miles pipeline replacement. Do you know what we're up to presently? What is the rate that we're
20
replacing?
miles right now.
So we're supposed to have been at 11. I think this year, I think we're only at, I think we will hit it this year because we deferred last year. So last year we didn't hit the required mark. But this coming year, as I showed, we're only going to be at 1.54 instead of the 12 miles.
Okay. So this year, we're at 1.54. That's the main replacement construction in Idea Palawan
That's for this coming fiscal year 24.
for 24.
Yes.
This past year, we had 11. You think you're
I
gonna,
think we're gonna hit 11 this current fiscal year.
so for fiscal year 2024, we only have 1.54 slated.
It'll drop down to it, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So the importance of source development too is to ensure there's enough capacity to support other community initiatives, you know, like development of affordable housing, all the development that we think is coming with transit-oriented development. The pipeline replacement program, we'll get back to that, but what we're looking at is actually being more aggressive on the leak detection side, because the issue about replacing these pipelines is to try to reduce the number of main breaks. So by expanding our capacity for leak detection, using the satellite technology and adding more personnel to that effort, is to try to find and repair the leaks on these pipes before they become catastrophic main breaks. So that's the other alternative that we're trying to do in the meantime, while reducing the number of pipeline projects. But I repeat again, right now we need source. Source is critical. We don't replace the source, and the source development takes so long to accomplish. We are looking at 6 potential sites to address source replacement for Red Hill. Because of constraints related to the sites, we're probably only going to move forward with 2 locations for an explorer. So 2 out of the 6. We continue to look for more sites, but it is very challenging.
So along those lines, speaking about source, I'm looking at the list of projects for capacity expansion. So the 2 water mains, Hualapai, as well as Honolulu District 32-inch mains. Does that go towards the delivery system?
The Honolulu District 42-inch main is actually a design contract, not construction. So the idea is, we know that that is going to be also a very large project. We want to start to design now. And after we kind of get through the source issues, then we can focus back and focus on pipeline replacement again.
Oh, I see. This 42-inch main is for pipeline replacement.
It's actually
The
it's a
design.
new 42-inch main to add another redundant pipeline.
Okay.
Because right now there is a single 42-inch main over parts of Honolulu that was constructed, I think, in the 1950s. If that pipeline breaks, getting water from the west where we have well capacity and moving it toward the east, toward Hawaii Kai and Waikiki would be really hampered. So the idea is put in another big pipeline, because the current pipeline is approaching 60 or 70 years old.
That's good.
Then when we get that new pipeline in service, we can go back and look at rehabbing the existing pipeline that was installed in the 50s to now create 2 redundant main arteries or pipeline transmission pipelines across Honolulu. Because the water is, again, for Honolulu, is moving primarily from the west toward the east. And we need to keep that capacity.
That's good.
And then Chair, the Kualakai Parkway 16 inches for the recycled water main. So it's not potable.
Let's see.
Yeah, so this one is, in a way, going to contribute toward expanding the use of recycled water on the plains of Ewa. Right now, the system is a pump system. It doesn't have a water tank like all our potable systems have water tanks where you pump the water up to the tank. You can let the tank store water for peak demands during the day and also stabilize pressure. So the R1 customers on this system have water available to them only at certain hours of the day when we operate the pumps to pressurize the system. So this will now provide 24/7 access to R1 recycled water, which I think is going to be very important to expanding the use of recycled water and an alternative source to using drinking water for irrigation, especially on that level plain. So we think it's a very important project. Barry is here. I think if there's any questions about the system, Barry can.
Maybe just a comment, Ernie. I mean, I'm fully tracking kind of where you're heading with wanting to look at the source over pipe replacement. I mean, right, these are like, what are the opportunity costs going in any direction? I think that the biggest thing for me is making sure that we say that out loud when we're talking about all of the different things that have completely shifted our trajectory at the Board of Water Supply because of Red Hill, right? I mean, we wouldn't have to be pushing as hard as we are in source capacity, but for the fact that Palau was off, right? And that
2 other wells.
Yeah, and so there's like, and I know it's really hard to quantify, like I wouldn't put it in kind of raise shop to say, well, what does this cost us? But it's important for us to say out loud because we were, working on all of these goals that have been on track for all these years, and then we're just basically halting, going from, 11 and 12 miles of pipe a year to 1.5, because we have to, pivot and talk about where we're gonna get enough water. And I think it's really important for us to say that as we move forward, because I think everyone here has done a really good job of just like figuring it out without just passing this on to the ratepayer, and like, Ernie doesn't get any more green shirts, right? Like they're trimming everything as best they can, but there's still like a pretty major crisis sitting here. We're just really good at being calm about it.
I sometimes people accuse me of being an alarmist or using hyperbole. But the story of Red Hill is a story that's still to be told, where that will lead us. There's the PFAS releases, and actually now at Red Hill, related to the Red Hill fuel facility, it appears that there is at least 4 PFAS releases, 3 prior that were not really reported. The latest was the 1,300 gallons, and we added 6 spilled right over the aquifer. But there are 3 other releases potentially. There's also the 180,000 gallons of past releases out of the Red Hill facility that's been released into the environment. It's moving someplace, we don't know where. And there's a general lack of an adequate monitor well network to provide. And the word is not Centennial, it's actually Sentinel. For monitor wells to stand guard, looking for contamination that might be moving with the underground aquifer with the groundwater, possibly toward our wells. So we will be looking at this for years and years to come.
So I think I'm looking ahead, and looking long-term, looking ahead to our rate-making study, I would echo again, given the challenges that we have, unprecedented with Red Hill. And for now, this is what we're doing. We're shifting just about almost everything to source development, and that's what we have to do. But I think looking forward, I think it's important that we still look at, and you've said it, Ernie, to look at our infrastructure, to look at our house.
Yeah.
And making sure that we have enough resources to expand capacity, because that's important, but also to mind our infrastructure.
I am completely with you, Chair. The board, thanks to the leadership of this board back in 2016, October of 2016, formally adopted the Board of Water Supply Master Plan. So we anticipate in the next year or so that we need to actually proceed to update that 30-year master plan, because plans are never really static. conditions that we deal with are not static. They don't stay unchanged over time. We have to be able to adapt, to adjust to the changing challenges that we face. So I think, Chair, the next update of the Water Master Plan is going to be very important because then it can talk about the Red Hill crisis, which we're going to be living with for a long, long time. Then also, maybe by then we'll have a better idea where the issues of PFAS contamination and what kind of water treatment systems we might have to install, or new wells or modifications to our system to address the PFAS contamination issues. So I think the next Water Master Plan, which the board here will be an active player in that, active part of that effort, will be very important.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
for the report.
Thank you.
Thank you. This time,
Yeah, I got a quick question for you, Ernie.
yeah, go ahead.
If on this search for new wells, just hypothetical, you find this big reservoir up on the North Shore, do we have the capacity to to,
Right now, we don't. And, many years ago, I think it was back in the 1990s, they asked me to kind of look at this, the option of bringing water from the North Shore, from the Mokulia area and pumping it right over Waihewa over to the Leeward Pearl Harbor area. It was hugely expensive, but there was the issue of taking the water from that aquifer there, which is needed to support agriculture in the area, and using it in Honolulu, but the cost was horrendous.
yeah, no, I'm just thinking that since we're looking for new sources, that if that happens, I mean,
Max,
we have to, I guess it's something we're gonna have to face. Yeah.
what the next project we'll talk about it, but this, and I don't want to panic people about the issues or concerns about PFAS, but there is a possibility that as we go to look at new well locations, especially as we move toward the Pearl Harbor area, that when we drill the well, we might find PFAS in the groundwater already there.
Oh, is that possibility?
And then we'll have to put in the treatment systems necessary to deal with it. But the next project we want to talk about, which I believe Barry O'Share is an important step forward for the Board of Water Supply, but I'll turn it over to Barry to talk about our Kaneohe desal project. Thank you, Barry.
Thank you, Ernie, and Mr. Chair and board members. Need help doing this stuff. So
Oh,
how do you,
oh, you just hit the space bar, then you.
space bar?
Yep.
Got it.
Oh, wait, you gotta go back.
Yeah. Thank you.
No, it's already gone.
Got it.
Yep.
Thank you. Technically challenged.
See what happens when you come in person? You got.
Not my computer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Board of Water Supply has awarded a contract for a design, construction, and operation of the Kalaeloa seawater desalination facility, and is funding this project over multiple years. So the first phase of the funding is in the current year, 23, and in this 24 for 18 million, and there's 60 million in 2024. And Ray will come in after to kind of explain the funding aspect, but I'm here to talk about the benefits and the impacts and mitigation of this project. So we are proposing a seawater desalination plant, starting small with a capacity of 1.7 million gallons per day, expandable in the future to 5. It's located in the Red Hatch area. It's located on 20 acres of land that has been conveyed to the Board of Water Supply. It's on Olai Street in Cambo Industrial Park. And you see Malka that is the PAR refinery. And then on the right side, the end of the Kalaeloa runway here. It's an undeveloped parcel that was selected by publicly conveyed to BWS at no cost under the Navy Barbers Point base realignment and closure in the early 2000s, late 90s and early 2000s. The objective of this project is to develop a sustainable seawater desalination facility that supports the EVA development plan's directed growth policies to EVA for the secondary urban center, with a drought-proof and high-quality local water supply that is environmentally sustainable, enhances water resilience to climate change, and reduces the water transfers to Central Oahu. And just a note there, the cost of the desalination plant is competitive to us trying to build a new transmission system over Wahiwa from North Shore, the wells, the pipelines, the reservoirs, and 17 miles of that, so it's competitive with that. We also seek to.
I ask you to ask that question now.
What's that?
About the North Shore water coming over to.
Oh, no, I just.
Thanks for teeing it up. There's one thing I remember forgetting, and that was it. So thank you. So we seek to ensure
Unrehearsed.
that we want to ensure that the introduction of this new source into the distribution system will cause no detrimental impact to the existing Campbell Industrial Park systems, or the local customers and their uses. So that's where it is. The structures, this is a conceptual site plan. It will change, but the structures will include an administration building, a lab, offices, conference room for visitors, a process building for process equipment tanks, grading, drainage, roads, parking lots, utilities, fencing, landscaping, mechanical and security systems. The facility will be sited at the northeast corner of this undeveloped parcel. There are 2 deep seawater wells. These blue dots up at the corner here, they were constructed back into the early 2000s. About 4 million gallons of salt water from those wells will be pumped through the treatment plant, demineralized, and 1.7 mgd of fresh water will be delivered to Campbell Industrial Park. And it will stay in Campbell Industrial Park because the park uses about 3 million gallons per day. A brine injection well located to the west here along Olai Street is planned. It has to be at least a quarter mile away from the source wells per DOH underground injection control rules. The Campbell Industrial Park is designated as an underground injection control area. So there are numerous injection wells in the air for industrial process water. So mostly it's cooling water being injected into the ground. There are 2 main environmental impacts of the project. It's power use and brine disposal. So I'm going to that. The desalination process will include include an energy recovery system, taking that high pressure brine and repressurizing the salt water saves a lot of energy to reduce power consumption within the plant. And we have 20 acres, and we're only using a couple of acres. So the rest of the parcel in the future are planned for photovoltaics in a later phase to offset the power costs. And we expect to apply and obtain additional federal grants for the renewable power systems. This is just a cross section of the geology there because I wanted to talk about the source and injection wells. And so there was a final EIS filed in 2008 with the Office of Environmental Quality Control, and as part of the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation grant application. So we're getting several grants with this. The U.S. Bureau grant application updated our engineering feasibility study and financial capability determination. So that's been completed. A National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA EA, is being developed by USBR. They expect the finding of no significant impact, meeting Section 106 archaeological inventory survey requirements. And then, so what we show here in the slide is that the saltwater wells are 2, they're deep. They're 1,600, one is 1,600 feet deep, the other is 2,100 feet deep. They're cased off through this upper cap rock and sediment layer depicted by this solid line, and then it's an open hole in the bottom. So we're pulling up the salt water, which from the basal formation, and which is hydraulically separate from the cap rock and sediment aquifer above it. So the brine injection is going to be a quarter mile to the west, but it occurs in this reef limestone area. So the gray is limestone, very porous. It's really not to scale. This is probably going to be about 300 feet deep. And so this is the limestone. The brown is clay and marine sediments, terrestrial sediments that have eroded over the Waianae volcanics over the several million years of the island, been above seawater. And the blue is the Waianae basalt. And so this line here where the brown and blue connect, we've determined that there's 100-foot thick clay layer that is keeps it hydraulically separate, because we don't want the brine that is injected into the caprock well, and because brine sinks, we don't want that recirculating in the saltwater well and making the source water saltier. And there's also injection wells that also inject into the caprock. So we're pretty certain that this clay layer exists and is physically separating it. So it's not like we get grabbing the desalination plants on the mainland. They take ocean outfalls or take water from the ocean, and then they inject the brine and blend it in an outfall. Those kinds of ocean connections have a lot of environmental impacts to that. So by using our well technology, we're keeping it in the formation and should not affect the inertial waters. And in this next slide, we did some hydraulic modeling. Intera did, our consultant, and it's based on USGS geologic studies and our well drilling logs. So I was saying the brine will sink because it's denser than salt water. It hits this clay layer, mounds here, and then starts to move by gravity along the slope of the contact, which is at 4%. And it moves, as it moves out to sea, it'll be diluted. And so it will not affect the benthic environment in the nearshore waters, and it won't recirculate into our source wells. So, and remember that our well is bottom out to the west, so it's superimposed on the profile. The Evo Watershed Management Plan is a regional integrated resource plan that describes this one water supply options for climate resilience, and it integrates all the natural and alternative water supplies, that's these buckets, and applies it to the appropriate uses. So imported and in-district potable, conservation, recycled water, desalinated water, stormwater that's captured like in the golf courses there. And then there's one perennial stream, it's Honolulu, that remains for traditional customary practices and natural resource protection. But the plan allocates or ties this diversified portfolio of different supplies to different uses like domestic, residential, commercial, industrial, landscape irrigation for recycled water and agriculture. The freshwater demand is approaching the EVA water systems capacity. So we're already working to reduce its reliance on groundwater supplies to diversify its supply by encouraging conservation, recycled water, and leveraging brackish and saline aquifer supplies where possible. The per capita demand in EVA is also decreasing because of conservation efficiencies from 168 in 2020. We anticipated going down to 160 by 2040. So conservation will increase efficiencies and bring the potable use down. But we're still close to our system capacity, so we need additional sources. Some of our sources in Waipahu have been redirected to town in response to Red Hill, and so we needed to pursue a couple of sources in the Kunia area and in Kalaloa. For the project's importance, we're saying we rely on groundwater for drinking, hygiene, and sanitation. We are facing challenges in these three areas as it relates to resources. And one is climate change, the depletion of water supply. I'll go into that. But because the supply is decreasing, because rainfall is decreasing, we expect regulatory actions by the Water Commission to decrease the aquifer sustainable yields. and thereby reducing the amount of water we can pump. And then we talked at length about the contamination events, Red Hill and PFAS, which effectively takes existing sources out of play. We have to find other sources of put in treatment so that we can continue to use that. So desalination is a sustainable and resilient source that will diversify our drinking water system. The recent UH climate models of future rainfall to 2100, which this shows graphically, it provides a wet and a dry future, depending on the which climate model. So the one on the top is statistical, it's drier. The one on the bottom is dynamical, it shows a potentially wetter future. Well, the models indicate that while the wet areas of the island may become wetter, the dry areas will become much drier. So as much as 65% drier in Leeward Oahu. So that's the dark red portions in Leeward Oahu. The dark blue is the areas that will get wetter. So we know that over the last 30 years, the Oahu's aquifer sustainable yield has steadily decreased from 400, when I started, it was 495 million gallons per day during the sugar plantation era. I'm dating myself, to 465 in the late 90s to 445 in the early 2000s. And currently it's 393.5 in 2019. The close of the sugar plantation and the large loss of the return irrigation, they're pumping a lot of groundwater, flooding the fields. That water was percolating and making the aquifer bigger. When the plantations closed, that stopped and the aquifers got smaller. But also because the rain has been decreasing too, is why the commission had to decrease the sustainable yields. So desalinated water will help to meet Eva's growth in water demand and allow groundwater sources to recover post-drought. It will allow us to replenish the so-called water bank a little faster by pumping less groundwater if we have this facility online. It's important after a severe drought to let the aquifers and our sources recover, let the heads build back up through conservation and through alternatives so that we allow it to build back up. Otherwise, if we keep drawing from it, we could bring up saltwater intrusion. So, and then it reduces the water imports from central Oahu. As I said, saying the Waipahu, Waipio sources are now moving into town. There's less water in the Waipahu Eva system. So this one, Kunia Wells 4 and Eva Shaft, in addition to Kalele, will provide those additional sources for this system, and we have the ability to move it to town. Okay, my last slide here. So I was saying that we awarded the contract on April 28th, my birthday, in fact. Anyway, we awarded the design, build, operate, and maintain project to Kaleloa D. Salco LLC in partnership with Nordic PCL Construction Inc. Total amount is $149,600 and change, fixed design build amount. And the annual operating fee is $2.7 million. And it's a 20-year operating and maintenance contract with options 2 5-year extensions, so 30-year total. And it's, like I said, it's fixed design. And with that shocker, I'll turn it back over to
Me again. Okay, so yes, that Barry went over the cost for the project that was awarded at the end of last month, and also happy belated birthday, Barry. I didn't know that. So we've got some funding opportunities here that we want to make sure we highlight when we talk about this Kaleloa desalination project. So at the top, we've got about $44 million in grant funding that can help buy down this $149 million cost. A $19 million grant to the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. And then the $25 million that I mentioned in state and local fiscal recovery funds from the city's American Rescue Plan Act monies. So while it is inexpensive, desalination, I think we've talked about it before, and we all recognize that desalination is expensive. There's a unique opportunity right now to reduce its cost impact to our ratepayers. As Barry mentioned, the land which the plant will be constructed on was provided at no cost by the federal government. I guess the strings attached, if not, there were no financial impacts, but we must build a desalination plant there or we'll lose it. So we can't just build anything on that piece of land that was given to us. The project is a congressionally authorized Title 16 project under the Hawaii Water Resources Act of 2005, and that's where that 19 million from the USBR will come, or that's why that's important. And it qualifies to receive the American Rescue Plan Act funding, which must be spent down by the end of 2026. So this project is on track to meet those timelines. So this is a really unique opportunity to be able to do a project with a big project with these ARPA funds. Also, this project, we're looking at WIFIA, or the Water Investment and Infrastructure Financing Act. Sorry, I can't ever remember what the
I think it's Water Innovation and Financing Investment Act. Right?
It would qualify for a WIFIA loan, which is a really low interest, or not as low as the SRF program, but also a low interest financing program for water utilities. And it's actually more flexible though than SRF. And then to further, I guess, kind of draw the picture of like how expensive desalination is. In Southern California, they're also doing a desalination plant. Theirs is going to cost them about $140 million. So our cost of 149 to develop is about, the market demands what the market demands to build these types of expensive facilities. And I just wanted to close and thank you for your time and your consideration of our proposed operating and CIP budgets. This just again summarized the total budget. So we're 241 on the operating budget, 223 on the capital. And this slide just shows how we intend to finance it. So the operating fund will pay for our operating budget. A small portion of will fund a portion of our capital improvement program, also the operating funds. Then the state revolving loan fund program, our special expendable fund, and improvement fund, which is sale of bonds, and the extramural fund. So yes, we are available though if you have any questions.
Any questions?
So I just got an operational one for Barry. Heaven forbid that we have to rely more on desalination. You said you can expand to 5 million gallons.
Can be, yeah.
Can you expand beyond 5 million, or is there any type of restrictions on expanding beyond 5 and,
Yeah, thanks for the question. The connecting pipe, there's some oversizing that's currently in this project. One of it is the 16-inch pipeline that we're connecting to the Temple Industrial Park. That can flow 5 MGD. To go beyond 5, we'll probably have to put another pipeline in, additional costs. But in terms of like more, the source wells can produce more salt water. We're putting in 2 injection wells. So it's just a matter of expanding the amount of reverse osmosis membrane skids, I guess, in the building. So maybe expanded building and add more skids or RO membranes. So there's some.
I guess the answer is yes.
okay.
If there was a need to say, take it up to 10 MGD or something larger,
Okay.
there's a potential.
Do we have the space for that too? Then?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
20 acres, and we're only using a couple of
Yeah,
them.
I'm just saying, heaven forbid we have to go to desalination.
The cost is quite high.
Yeah.
There is this opportunity for $44 million in federal funds, grant funds that we don't have to repay to buy down the cost. So it'll be about effectively about $105 million. We went out through a competitive bidding process. So there were at least 2 bidders, I think, that responded. This is one of the bidders' price. We made the award. We felt that it was the best value for the procurement. The other bidder was also in the $109 million range
Right.
for project costs. But when we look at the net present value over the 20-year or 30-year operating period, this, even though higher upfront costs over the 30 years, this contractor was actually a better value under our net present value analysis. The other contractor had a lower upfront cost, but a higher operating cost per year.
So my question would be, how are we gonna finance the remaining 105 million?
Yeah, so we're gonna.
Well, I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe,
Go ahead.
I don't really have a slide, but I can talk through it. So that 44, well, we financed 18 million this year, came from our special expendable fund. Those are 23, yep. So that was to make the award and to account for the first year of project spending. Next year, we're budgeted a 60 million, right? So that was gonna break down into 25 million of more grant monies from the ARPA Act, and then 35 million more from our water systems facility charge or special X fund. The year after that, sorry, I should say construction was expected to, we're expecting to complete this by the end of 2026. So it's going fast. The first 2 years are slow on the design build part, and then it gets really expensive towards the last two. So then in fiscal year 25, we will hopefully by then have secured the USBR grant loan of 19 million. And that's when we start mixing in the low interest or WIFIA financing. So that's when we'll start bringing in the WIFIA loan if we secure the loan to finance the rest from years 3 and 4 on as they finish construction. So the first, we're planning on not burning down, but like spending the ARPA money as quickly as we can to get that out. We're mixing in our own capacity expansion money in that special X fund. And then the WIFIA will finance up to 49% of infrastructure project like this. So probably 49% of that 145 million. Yeah, about 70 in a WIFIA loan.
Yeah, so the WIFIA loans to the US EPA, they finance larger projects, $20 million in project. So they also have very, very flexible repayment, where you don't have to actually repay up to 5 years after completion of construction. And it's for a 30-year period. So we would finance a good portion of the project through WIFIA. And continue to pursue any other sources of funds that we might be able to find. But right now, we have submitted a letter of interest to the US EPA. They accepted our letter of interest, so we'll be working on a WIFIA loan for this project. It'll be the first one in Hawaii.
Oh, well.
Yeah, so EPA actually, over a year ago, approached us because they wanted to loan funds to Hawaii, and Hawaii is one of the few remaining states that haven't utilized WIFIA loans. One are innovation financing and investment funds. So this would be, this is an opportunity for us. We have preliminary approval. We're going to put in the loan application. That's the strategy.
So, Ray, you mentioned WIFIA loans for larger projects. Approximately what's the dollar value for?
Oh, the Joe can probably help, but the examples that we were looking at of what the EPA has funded has been in the hundreds of millions, so $200 million big sewer kind of projects that were funded, but they know that we're looking for $70 to $80 million in financing, and that's okay with them. They gave us a letter, or they gave us an invitation to apply is where we're at, and we're hoping to get our application in the fall, maybe September, October, late fall. And the loan process, Joe, takes about 9 months or so from there. So if all plays out well, we'll close on the loan and have the funding available to us before we need it all in fiscal year 25 and 26.
Just
other part-
Phil, just to fill in some detail on WIFIA, generally the minimum project amount is $20 million. So they don't fund any projects under $20 million. And yeah, most projects are in the 150 to 200 to $300 million range. Actually, they generally fund more wastewater projects, which are generally more expensive. But that is the range. And there are some that go when they there are some what they call master loan agreements that I think go up to close to $1 billion over the life of the group of projects that they're proposing. And yeah, we are expecting we're still developing the financing plan, so none of the numbers are firmed up yet. But yeah, we're expecting about a $73 million WIFIA loan. And that has an advantage, yes, that we don't start paying interest on it until we draw on it. And so we may use some interim financing techniques to delay that. And then also we can renegotiate the rate one time. So if rates have gone up, but they're still very affordable. But if rates go down, we can renegotiate to a lower rate. Which again is an advantage. The other flexible term is we can, just like kind of a mortgage, we can have a balloon payment. We can pay, we can structure it so that we pay interest only for a certain period and then start paying principal payments further down the road. And like a mortgage, you can pay it off at any time. If we suddenly get reimbursed for some of our other expenses or find other sources of money, we can pay it off and be done with the obligation. And the interest rate is basically the treasury rate plus 1 basis point, and 1 basis point is 0.01% of interest. So it's basically the treasury rate of borrowing. So that's just a little bit of information on the WIFIA portion of financing this project. We also may get some SRF funding, probably in the range of, $20 to $25 million.
Okay, thank you. Is the $25 million ARPA funds, are those pretty much a sure thing?
We actually have the funds already.
Okay.
The city transferred the funds to us quite quickly, but there is a condition for you using those funds. You have to be able to encumber it into a contract by end of 2024, and you have to fully spend the money by end of 2026. So that we have in total 50.3 million, thanks to the mayor and to the city council of this ARPA grant funds, fiscal recovery funds. 25.3 was the first batch, and they're allocated to some of the CIP projects currently being bid out right now. We want to get them done, but we have to complete them by the end of 2026. This is the second tranche that I just acknowledged the Honolulu City Council, the chair and the council members for allocating. We didn't even request it. They allocated out of the second batch of ARPA funds, $25 million to us to support our efforts. So I think this is a rare opportunity. I've been looking at seawater desalination for over 30 years, and we've never actually accomplished it, but I think it's important that we actually move forward once and for all on a project, because a number of things. One of the things is it's a tough permitting process. It's not easy to do these types of projects, desalination plants. And also, we want to successfully blend that water that we've demineralized through desalination with our groundwater-based system in the pipes, so that they don't create water quality problems for our customers. So we want to learn how to do that before we get into a crisis, a situation where there's long-term drought and we're running out of groundwater, or rainfall has decreased drastically, or there's a mass contamination issue that takes out a number of our wells until we can get treatment, if treatment is even viable in place. So it's taking that small first step, but it's important to get the experience and learn how to do this now before, for the future. The San Diego County is using about 10% of their water supply comes from desalination, which is quite high. But I think this is an important first step. If we can agree to the funding of this project. It's going to survive beyond my time here as the manager. It'll be for the next generation.
So in the mid-90s, when I worked here in the comms department with Arthur and all those, JC and all those guys, gave our presentation at Halava. That was part of the presentation, and we'll be starting desal soon. So I'm glad you haven't made me a liar. Soon in water work time is, you know.
This
pretty
process,
exciting.
we actually have completed the procurement process. So we actually have a company to build this. But yeah, that was 1990. I remember looking and recommending desalination, but it didn't get supported then.
May I ask a couple questions, just out of curiosity? So Board of Water wouldn't be the operating entity for this,
We would own the facility, but it would be operated by this.
contracted out?
Yeah.
And this is like a mainline company or?
This company, maybe Barry can explain some background about this company.
Yeah, this Calilo DeSalco is an LLC that they made here, incorporated here, but DeSalco does a number of projects in the East Coast and in the Caribbean.
Oh, okay.
So they have a tremendous amount of operation and maintenance experience in operating seawater desalinations from saltwater wells.
Right.
So
So Board of Water will own the improvements, do they own the fee too?
We own, when we do this, a condition of the federal government for us to own the land outright is that we have to do desalination. So once we do desalination, then we would become the fee owner of the property.
we will have met their condition.
Oh, okay.
We hold a deed.
Oh,
Oh, so it's not like a 99-year lease or something like that?
No, it's yeah, conveyance, right?
if we don't do
Conditional.
desal, they could take
Take
it
it
back.
away, right?
And then we'd have to buy the land back.
So what about like the improvements? I'm just curious. I mean, it seems like kind of, is there roads going into it already, or is it, you gotta build all that infrastructure in?
Calilo is an existing roadway within
it is?
industrial park, but we'd have,
Olay Street.
yeah, well, Light Street is a
That's a,
existing road.
I haven't been.
But we'd have to put in a pipeline and connect it up.
As this project moves forward, some of the first steps will be pilot testing to determine the final design for the treatment system.
Correct.
We can have a ability to take some of the board members in groups
Yeah.
out there to view the site. It is a challenging site because of some of the archaeological issues. We're working through those. I just think this is the opportunity to do it right now.
Well, it's kind of incredible you guys, forecasted out, just the whole contract and everything with all the rate increases and just assumption. Yeah,
It wasn't an easy procurement.
no, yeah,
Thank you to Barry and team
Yeah, we had a good team.
and our procurement staff, also with Raylan. Yeah. This will be the first seawater desal facility for any of the county water departments in Hawaii.
Okay.
Thank you, Ernie.
Members, any questions, comments? I think, is this the end of the,
Yes.
any questions, comments from the board members that haven't been brought up? Okay, real quick, going back to the $10 million, I guess appropriation from the legislature, House Bill 300.
Right.
We make sure we send appropriate letter thanking appropriate individual people or offices.
I
for that.
will make sure we send a letter to the speaker and the Senate president.
Yeah, and whoever was instrumental. And then if we could monitor the release of it, because it's one thing to appropriate, it's another thing to have them released at once.
Yes, Chair, I actually am contact with the governor's chief of staff to, and I'll be sure to ask her to, when we get the allotment request, allotment release request to the governor,
Okay.
to ask the governor's office for help.
Okay, well, some exciting times, really. Excited about the D-cell facility. A little concerned on, our infrastructure that we're having to, but we'll work through it with our wood rate study and
And the
Moving
update of
forward.
the water master plan
yeah,
to kind of incorporate all these challenges that we're now facing. It wasn't something we foresaw back in 2016.
okay, so I think the process is we adjourn for today, and then we will approve this at the next board meeting. Is that-
Yes, next board meeting later this month, there'll be a public hearing before the board meeting about the proposed operating and capital improvement program budgets. And then during the regular meeting, which occurs right after the public hearing is closed, the board would consider adoption of the budget.
Okay, okay, I guess, is there any further business? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
Right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. All right, I think more passes, we stand adjourned.
Warren, thanks for joining us.
Oh,
Welcome,
thank
Warren.
you. Thank you everyone for having me. Appreciate it.
Okay, mahalo.
You.